What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Inside Inter Miami, your Miami Herald's show on everything Inter Miami. Of course, the roller coaster ride that we seem to be on week in and week out. I'm your host, Andre Fernandez, joined as always by our Inter Miami beat writer, Michelle Kaufman. And since our last episode, a lot has happened. Lionel Messi returns from injury, helps Miami finally beat that hated Orlando City, the big rival, 3-1 in the Leagues Cup semis, scores a pair of goals. Javier Mascherano suspended for that game, coach from the third level booth, but Miami found a way. But then they fly across the country to Seattle with a lot of high hopes to finally bring home a trophy. This team wanted so many trophies, not getting that many of them. And again, they come up short in front of a raucous crowd of 70,000 at Lumen Field, the stadium shared by the Sounders and the Seahawks in the NFL. And even though everyone was in the lineup, they lost 3-0. That was bad enough. But then a really bad post-game brawl broke out, which has gone viral since then on social media. That's all the talk in the soccer world these days. And they also lost hometown favorite Benja Cremaschi, who left on loan to Italian club Parma. So we'll break down all of the mayhem from this past week. Another crazy week for this club, Michelle. But let's start with that roller coaster with Messi coming back. I guess it's hard to start somewhere not on the brawl, but there was a bright spot before the brawl that just didn't carry over to Seattle.
We'll cover the bright spot, which seems like it was a month ago, to be
Right.
honest,
It really
because
does.
when I was looking to see what did we cover in last week's episode, and I'm like, wow, we didn't even cover the Orlando game in
Yeah.
last week's episode because that was last Wednesday. I mean, it seems a long time ago. A
That's what
lot
happens
has
with this
happened.
compressed schedule with
That's what
games on
happens with this
Wednesdays and
schedule too.
Sundays. And yep.
But also with this team, whatever happened 2 games ago with this team is ancient history
Yeah.
because there's always new drama
Yep.
with the most recent game. And this is, the ultimate example. But yes, let's start quickly reviewing the Orlando game. This was a game that they really, really, really wanted to win. We had talked about the huge rivalry with Orlando, the purple versus the pink. Was Messi going to be back? Of course, he was going to be back. That is the game he wanted to play. So he came back from injury, and everybody was ready. Everybody played, and even so, they were, they were not in control of that. They were not going to win that game until Lionel Messi once again pulled out of his magic hat. He scored on a penalty kick. Dado Allende drew a foul in the box, and he ends up scoring on the PK. Messi, and then Messi scores again 10 minutes later, and Segovia scored. So they end up winning 3-1. Everybody was jubilant. Lionel Messi looked very happy after that game. He went over and was applauding the fans, which he doesn't always do. He was, sharing in the celebration with everybody. It was a joyous moment for Inter Miami in Chase Stadium. Yay. They beat Orlando. They hate Orlando. They had lost to Orlando twice this year badly. And then they turned the tables, beat them in a very significant game, and earn a spot in the Leagues Cup final. And they fly to Seattle, like you said. Even fans flew to Seattle. And before the game, Jorge Mas and David Beckham were on the field. And Jorge Mas was talking about how this team wants to lift trophies. This team wants to lift trophies. And then what happened?
All mayhem broke loose. Well, for starters, they kind of got their let's just say it. They got their hindquarters kicked by Seattle. It was ugly on the field during the game, but then uglier after the game. And I'm sure by now, if you're tuned in even the slightest bit to the soccer world, you've seen some kind of photo, video, something online, something that's shown this ugly
Yeah, and even
incident
if
between them.
even for people who don't follow
But
the
we've
soccer
got
world,
but we've
to
got
be
some for
honest,
you.
yeah. But the thing is, uh, everybody has now seen these videos, and it's not good for MLS.
No.
I'm sure that in New York, Don Garber and everybody else, these images, this is not what people want. This is not what MLS wanted They wanted videos and photos of Seattle Sounders or Inter Miami lifting a trophy, or they wanted highlights of the game. Instead, the images that are going around the world are,
We've got one to
pictures.
show the people right there.
These are the images of that game. And, Leagues Cup is a tournament that was, invented by MLS and Liga MX, 2 years ago, actually, 2023 was the first one. This is a tournament that they're trying to grow. They want people to take this tournament seriously. A lot of people didn't really care about Leagues Cup, but here they have a final with 70,000 people in the stands. Inter Miami, Lionel Messi against Seattle Sounders, one of the perennial winners of this league with the best fan base. I mean, honestly, their fan base is unbelievable, has been forever. If you follow MLS, the march to the match that they do through downtown to the stadium is really something to see. So MLS and Liga MX finally have this spectacle of a Leagues Cup final with 70,000 people in attendance. And, this is the image that is left over. Image of fighting, an image of Luis Suarez spitting on the face of the director of security of the Seattle Sounders, no less, of everyone to spit on, the director of security of the Seattle Sounders. It was a very, very ugly scene, and it really did overshadow, unfortunately, the game. And let's talk about the game briefly, and then we're going to go into the brawl. The game itself was the first embarrassment for Inter Miami, which is why those players, I think, were so frustrated after and all of this happened, because Miami had all of its stars. Everybody was in the starting lineup, okay? And Seattle Sounders, even though they are, like I said, a perennial winner, the players in their starting lineup, they have a lot of injuries. They had some guys suspended. Some of the guys playing were players who came up from the Tacoma Defiance from their second team not that long ago. Players who have come up through, Seattle was built on their academy and on their homegrown players. In fact, they had a huge banner in their stands. The fans put up a big banner that said success is built, not bought. Success is built, not bought. This was a clash of two clubs that have done it very different ways, okay? Seattle has done it by building from within, by building from locals. Got to that final by buying all the players from Barcelona. And so this was a really interesting matchup. 70,000 people. Guess what? Seattle won 3-0. They dominated the game. Yes, in the second half, Miami looked better than they did in the first half. But at the end of the day, all of that star power, all of that money, all of the glitz and glamour of Inter Miami, they did not score a single goal. And Lionel Messi himself missed an easy chance that Luis Suarez gave him a beautiful assist right in front of the goal, and he shanked it over the crossbar, which is highly unusual. He would make that shot 9 times out of 10, but he missed it on that day. And then another
there were
one.
a few chances.
Not
just Messi. Yeah. Oh, okay. You're going to go to Allende. I was going to say Allende missed one too, right early in the second half, which looked gift wrapped. When it was still 1-0, and they still had a chance.
Still had a chance. Gift wrap, 2 opportunities that they could have scored 2 goals right there and didn't. And Seattle took advantage of its opportunities. And so at the end of the day, the Seattle homegrown team with the very passionate fan base that are not fans of one player. They are fans of the Seattle Sounders. No matter who's playing for that team, since they joined the league, those fans love that team. They wear the scarf. They have all of these, traditions that they do before the game. So anyway, they end up winning. Let's hear first from the 2 coaches. Let's start with Mascherano about what happened in the game. We're going to talk about the brawl after, but let's hear about the game first.
Creo que obviamente en este tipo de partidos los detalles terminan siendo claves. A nosotros, sobre todo los primeros minutos del primer tiempo, nos costó el partido. Y bueno, a partir de ahí intentamos ir creciendo dentro del partido. Lamentablemente tomamos el gol en la primera parte. Creo que el segundo tiempo mejoramos muchísimo, de hecho dominamos, tuvimos ocasiones como para poder empatarlo, pero bueno, lamentablemente muchas veces por más que lo intentes, a veces suele ser tarde. Mm, Creo que al final el resultado 3-0 termina siendo demasiado abultado por lo que pasó en el partido. El partido fue mucho más parejo. Claramente en los últimos minutos nosotros teníamos que tomar riesgo para tratar de empatar. Hicimos cambios ofensivos, sabíamos que íbamos a correr los riesgos que corrimos atrás. Y bueno, al final creo que el penal, el segundo gol, nos termina eh, quizás ya empieza a terminarse el partido en ese resultado, en esa acción, perdón.
Okay, so you can hear me. He looks dejected and he sounds dejected. Obviously, he said early in the game, details are really important, and the first part of the game really cost us. He said, unfortunately, that we went down 1-0. He felt that in the second half, they did improve a lot. He said we actually dominated a lot of parts of the second half. We had chances to equalize, and we didn't. And then late in the game, was really kind of too late. He felt that 3-0, that the score line was more lopsided than the game actually was, which I guess I could agree with that. By the second half, they did play much better, dominated much of the second half. But at the end of the day, he said we had to take risks at the end. And there has been, a lot of people have questioned the move that he made toward the end of the game. He because they were losing and needed to score, he took out Lujan from the back line, and he dropped Boosie back there to center back, and then he brought in Segovia. So he brought in an attacker and took out a defender because they needed to score more goals.
Yeah.
And he brought in Fafa also. He brought in Fafa, Segovia, brought in guys off the bench who were scorers, took out Lujan, dropped back Boosie to center back. And in doing so, it did weaken the defense. It did weaken the defense when you do that.
Right.
And also, in some ways, clogged up the front a little bit. And so they looked a little bit disjointed offensively. And at the same time, when the other team gets on the counter and you have a weakened defense and Sergio Busquets in the back in the middle, which is not his natural position, and he's done it before, but it's not his best place to play, that made it a little more difficult. But he said, we had to take the risks at the end. One of the goals was on a PK. Yannick Bright, who had a fantastic game. He really did. Yannick Bright had a wonderful game in the midfield, stole a lot of balls, disrupted a lot of things. But he ran. He was chasing on the counter. He sprinted to catch the guy and tries to take the ball out from under him, gets called for a foul in the box. They get the PK, and then they score another goal on top of that. So, that's what happened in the game. Let's hear from the Seattle coach about his take on why they won the game.
Look, the comment I made about Paul Rothrock prior to this game, Christina and I were sitting at dinner and we're having a glass of wine and we're talking about, I was talking about Messi and Suarez and and she said, stop talking about Miami. Let's talk about our boys. And, that gave me the impetus when you guys asked me the question in the scrum. Let's talk about our guys because we have a great team. They might not be the names that are in the world stage, but they're certainly, talented people, talented players. They put everything into their craft. And so when I went down the list of Paul and Jackson and Snyder and Pedro and Christian and Alex and Steph and everything, they're not household names across the world, but as a collective, they're very strong. And so that again is what kind of, gave us the advantage, again, unadvantage, I should say, because look, again, that was a back and forth game. That game could, goals change games. That could have changed 1-1 or, something like that. But, Alex having the PK. I mean, at some point, you guys are going to give me credit for bringing Georgie on the field. I mean, it was a great move by Georgie. Been working with the kid a lot, and 2-0. Then Paul's signature goal, just hustle and being in the right place at the right time. Couldn't have scripted a better ending for the game.
What he says is absolutely true. He said, our guys, they're not big names on the world stage. I mean, again, this was a clash of two clubs who have done it a different way. And that team, none of those players are known. They're not well-known players around the world, but collectively, Seattle Sounders is always a team to be reckoned with year in and year out. Their organization is very, very strong. Chris Henderson is the one who helped build that team for a long time. And now his brother, Sean Henderson, is the sporting director. Okay. That club has a history of taking their players, their hometown, their homegrown players from their academy. They bring them up to this Tacoma team for their second team, and then they promote them to the first team. And by the way, when David Beckham first got here and said he wanted a team in Miami back in 2014, we're talking 11 years ago now, when he first said that, and every minute after that, he always said, because he came from Manchester United, which was a club that had what he would always talk about, the DNA of the club, is that you want to develop a strong academy and bring the academy kids up to the senior team. That is what David Beckham had in mind when this team was founded. Okay. And they have done that to a certain degree. They did bring up Kramashi Benhow, who we're going to talk about later. Ian Frey, Noah Allen, Yannick Bright came up through the MLS draft. So there have been players on this roster that came up that way. But this team is now relying a lot on star power. And what the Seattle coach is saying there is, look, our players are not big stars around the world, but collectively, they're a strong team.
Well,
and they are.
This is a fascinating thing. Again, this overall overarching storyline that we keep seeing, and we have seen now for a while. The undercurrent of, like you said, like the sign said it all, built versus bought. We've seen that before. It's not just Seattle. We saw it with Vancouver. We've seen it with Orlando. I know Orlando takes it up a notch because of the whole state rivalry, but there's an undercurrent of MLS. I guess you could call it MLS pride, the homegrown. We're going to stick it to these outsiders that have come in and become rock stars in our league. Even
getting
though
all the attention. Yeah, the league is.
Even though, look,
the
league is getting all sorts of money and visibility from all of this. That's the kind of, I don't want to call it, maybe hypocrisy is a strong word, but that's the I'll say the contrast of this is that they are gaining so much from it, but at the same time, they've created this us against them mentality. All these teams want to beat Miami. Miami's the outsiders.
Everyone wants to beat Miami, and the league, a lot of the promotion of the league, of these tournaments, it's through a pink lens. A lot of the promotions are with Messi and with Inter Miami, and their games and this and that are the ones that are most visible, which it makes sense. Lionel Messi is arguably the best player of all time. He's playing in MLS right now. He happens to play on this pink team. So this team is going to get all the attention.
Yeah.
But around the world, there are people watching only because Messi is in this league. They were not watching MLS before. Now they're watching because Messi's there. So the impact that he's had is unquestioned. It's there's no question the impact of the growth of the league because of him. But all of the other teams, you cannot blame them for having some resentment that, hey, we play too. Hello.
Well,
We are the Seattle Sounders. We had, going into that game, they had 8 trophies to their name. Now they have 9.
and
They've won 8 trophies. So where's the love for the Seattle Sounders around the world, around the country? Everyone is focusing on Inter Miami. How about us? How about the Seattle Sounders? And
yeah.
this is this
Look,
is motivating factor for the other teams.
right. Look, everyone said Messi's going to come in here and he's just going to stomp all of this. This is below him. This league is can't hang with a player of his caliber. And then you brought in Suarez and Alba and Busquets, and then all of a sudden you had 4 or 5 of these elite players.
Fantastic 5.
How the heck is anyone? But guess what? How many trophies have they won so far? Uno solo. And I think there's an undercurrent. Well, yes, but there's an undercurrent.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I guess everybody values that more when nothing came of it after that. But yeah,
right.
But I think you'll agree with me. There, to a point, there's an undercurrent also of the whole outsiders thing. That this is an American league too, and I think the home, especially the American players, I think probably feel like for a long time MLS was seen as the 6th-rate league. This is our league. We're going to show that we can compete on the world stage. There's a little bit of even that national thing going too, I think. I mean, I know there's international players all over the league as well, but I think you see it sometimes too with some of the players, like the homegrown, like they want.
They want to show that,
they want to show how good they are
play
too,
the game in this country,
and that they're not exactly.
On American soil.
You always hear it when it comes to the U.S. men's team. And when are we finally going to be good on the national stage? When are we finally going to be able to compete with, Germany and Argentina and all of that? And you're still so many miles away from that. There's a little bit rooted also in, maybe more than a little bit rooted also in this whole, resentment, whatever you want to call it.
MLS versus the leagues around the world.
And now MLS versus Inter Miami. Let's be real about it. There are the teams, not the league itself, because the league itself is obviously profiting from it, like we said before. But there's a let's beat these guys who come in here and turn into and are rock stars and think they're just going to push us around. And so far the league has shown.
The people in Seattle are like, you know what? There was MLS before Messi. Seattle had lots of fans. People come out to watch other teams. And, I think there's definitely a resentment. Every league and every sport always has the team that everybody loves to hate. Miami, it seems to be, whether it was the Heat or whether it's University of Miami football in its heyday, people do love to hate on Miami in the first place. Miami is always the city that people love to hate Miami in the first place. But then in this case, everything we're talking about, these superstars come in and the other MLS teams want to show, hey, you're not going to roll all over us. And by the way, I think as time goes on, maybe when Messi first got here in 2023, July, 2 years ago more, there was some intimidation the first time that all of these teams played against Inter Miami. Was like, ooh, we're playing against Messi. And it's still a big deal to play against Messi. They all talk about it. But I think they're not as intimidated as they used to be because they've seen Vancouver beat them. They've seen Minnesota beat them. They've seen Orlando beat them. They've seen, they are not invincible. Right. They are superstars, but they are not invincible. And time after time that they get beat, that message gets reinforced more and more to the other players in this league that, hey, you know what? If you put together a good game plan, they are beatable. And, and if you swarm Messi with 5 defenders, he does get frustrated and he cannot always dribble through 5 people. Sometimes he does. Sometimes he does amazing things, and we've talked about it, but not all the time. And the other teams sometimes, especially the ones with very good coaches, they figure out how to restrict Messi and how to keep him from getting the ball and how to keep him from doing what he does. And so it can be very frustrating to the Inter Miami stars And this is what happened the other night.
Right.
I think, I mean, we are still waiting to hear what the sanctions are going to be, but it was ugly. I did a breakdown of what happened. You can read it on MiamiHerald.com. It's sort of a play-by-play of the brawl that happened after the game. But basically, the game ended. They were clearly frustrated. They just lost 3-0. There were 70,000 fans there. And I am sure, I don't know because I was not on the field, I am sure there was some taunting, probably from Seattle players, some kind of, even it was just exuberant celebration in their faces, like, hey, we just beat Lionel Messi's team. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That had to irritate these players from Inter Miami. Anyway, Luis Suarez makes a beeline straight over to Vargas, who's a player who had been covering Messi relentlessly the entire game, irritating him, getting under his skin, playing relentless defense on Messi. He went straight over to him, put his arm around his neck in a kind of aggressive way and starts shouting something into his ear. Then another guy comes in to pull him away, and then everything goes crazy. And Sergio Busquets, who is not usually, he does argue with refs a lot. All of the Miami players seem to do that, but he's not usually a violent guy, but he did hit, he hit a player in the face. And then it just went crazy. After that, other people jumped in from both teams. The Seattle staff, assistant coaches jumped in. The director of security jumps in. And it became a very ugly fight. Let's hear from both coaches about what they said about the fight immediately after the game. Let's hear first from Javier Mascherano.
No tengo nada que decir porque la verdad que no estaba lejos de las acciones y no sé lo que ha pasado. Sí, claramente a nadie nos gusta que al final del partido eh, haya este tipo de acciones. También cuando hay una reacción puede ser que haya una provocación. Pero bueno, no voy a hacer comentarios porque no sé qué es lo que pasó.
All right. So what he said is, I don't know what happened. I don't really want to make too much of a comment because I wasn't there. I was far away. Sometimes, of course, he said, none of us want to see these types of incidents. Sometimes when these incidents happen, there is provocation, but I don't know because I wasn't there.
Right.
So that is how he saw it. He didn't really have too much to say. Brian Schmetzer had a little more to say. Let's hear what he had to say, and then we'll discuss.
Well, my statements is, unfortunately, that is going to take some of the attention away from what was a great Sounder performance. So I can take that as a compliment that their players were frustrated, and frustrations led to some things that shouldn't happen on the field. But that shouldn't be the story. I'm going to shut that down. I'm going to say that the story is, Andrew Thomas having a good run of games and winning a Leagues Cup, Pedro winning his trophy, Alex winning his MVP, Reed Baker Whiting coming on in tough circumstances, Christian gutting through. That was the mysterious player that was carrying an injury. And I'm surprised you guys didn't catch that, because I never sub Christian out of games, and I subbed him out in LA, and you guys didn't catch that. And so, he gutted through an injury. And so the story of this game is not what happened after the fact. The story of the game is the Seattle Sounders. Now, what I would say to that is, afterwards, I had a quiet moment with Messi on the field, and I said, lo siento, and, we talked and we tried to push it aside. Javier Mascherano is a great coach. And again, before the game, on the walkout, he was very complimentary of our team, and I appreciated that. David Beckham, to his credit, was waiting for everybody in the tunnel for our players to shake their hands. And that is class through and through. Jorge Mas came up to me before the game, before the warm-up started, an hour and a half prior to kickoff, and said, you guys have a very nice team. You guys are consistent. And those are people that have been at the highest levels of our sport giving our team compliments. And that's the story. That's the story.
Okay, so Brian Schmetzer, I love his comments, and he wishes that that's the story. The story should be the Seattle Sounders and how well they played, and how they, shut down these big world superstars of Inter Miami. That should be the story following that game, but it's not. Okay, this is reality. The reality is that if the brawl had not happened, a lot of news organizations wouldn't even have written anything or shown any footage or highlights of this game on TV. That's the honest truth. ESPN, the only highlights that they showed from that game over and over, there were no highlights from the actual action of the game. There were no highlights of any of those players that Schmetzer was talking about.
Right.
There were no highlights of Seattle holding up the trophy. The only footage that is being shown over and over is punching and spitting. Punching and spitting is all that's being shown. Those are the images. And so what should have been the story is Seattle Sounders is not the story. The story after that game, unfortunately, because of human nature, is the fight. That's what the most people are interested in, and people who don't even know anything about MLS, people who've never even heard of the Leagues Cup and don't know or care what the result of the Leagues Cup was, they know now that there was a big fight with Messi's team. Messi was not in the fight, as Schmetzer said. Messi was way off to the side, shaking Schmetzer's hand very calmly while the melee is going on behind him. And David Beckham showing a lot of class to stand in the tunnel and shake everyone's hand, and so on. And that's why when you look at the aftermath of this, I have not spoken to David Beckham, but I can guarantee you David Beckham is a guy who has built his entire career on class, on being classy, not only how he dresses, but how he acts. He has been one of the classiest athletes over several decades as a player, as an owner now, and that cannot sit well with him, that this man and the other co-owners, the Moss brothers, who come out in their Navy suits with the team crest and who are so classy before the game, congratulating the other coach and so on, and their players are out there fighting and spitting after a game. It's a very bad image for the club.
Yeah, it's a very bad look.
Very bad look. Very bad look. So now the question is, what's going to happen? We've been waiting now. This game was Sunday night. It's Wednesday. We're waiting to see what are the sanctions. The Leagues Cup organization. So MLS and Liga MX are co-hosting this tournament, but that tournament has its own organization. That organization is the one that will be handing down the sanctions. I suppose MLS could also on its own, because these are MLS players representing MLS and wearing MLS uniforms when this is happening. But the Leagues Cup is the one that is reviewing and investigating the whole incident to try to figure out what should happen going forward. I'm curious, Andre, what do you think? If you were the Leagues Cup Discipline Committee chair, what would you do here?
Well, I mean, that's the tricky part is, are there fines, are there suspensions coming that can carry over into the MLS season? Because obviously the Leagues Cup's over. So what consequence are you going to have other than, I mean, it's not extreme enough where you could say, oh, we're banning you from next year's tournament or something like that. Or, I mean, I don't think it's that extreme that it could be, but it deserves some sort of, if this was in a regular league game, you'd probably have suspensions after something like that. So does that carry over in the MLS play? I mean, this team, as we know, is trying to move up in the standings, trying to solidify their playoff positioning. They've got a rematch coming with this Sounders team in 2 weeks.
That's the amazing thing on the 16th. Circle the
Right.
calendar, everybody. September 16th, which is in less than 2 weeks. These two teams meet again in Fort Lauderdale in a regular season game.
You know, because you could find the team, you could sanction the team in that sense, but you know, deep pockets. I think the suspensions are the ones that would hurt the most and probably would be deserved. If this was a regular MLS game, we'd be seeing that. So that's where I wonder if this will come into play now. And again, that would hurt because, like I said, this team needs anytime it can get 3 points right now in league play since the regular season's winding down.
Yeah, I mean, this is the big question. If I think suspensions definitely are deserved, and multiple game suspensions, to be honest, for the spitting. There is a precedent in MLS. A player, Hector Herrera, last year, I believe it was last year, a couple years ago, a spitting incident. He was suspended 3 games. He was suspended 3 games for a spitting incident in an MLS setting. So there is precedent there for spitting and sanctions for that type of behavior. So I do think that suspensions are in order. And the question is, yes, will the suspensions be right away for the next MLS games? They play Charlotte on the road on the
September
13th.
13th. Yep.
September 13th, they play Charlotte on the road, and then they play the 16th against Seattle Sounders here. Those are the next 2 games.
It's interesting. It's interesting that this break now, this international break for a week or so, comes at a time like this where now they're sort of left picking up the pieces after this mess for the next week or so before they get back into training for the Charlotte game. But
yeah, they have a whole week.
Yeah.
The FIFA break is going on this week, and Messi and DePaul are off in Argentina playing for Argentina, and Telasco Segovia. They're all sort of distracted this week, but this is still brewing. While those guys are with their national teams, this is still brewing, and we're waiting. I'm thinking maybe sometime, in the next day for sure too, the sanctions or fines will come down. If it has to do with next year's Leagues Cup, again, how much of a punishment is that? Especially when you're talking about, Luis Suarez. We don't even know if he'll be still playing.
He may not be
or will
playing
he be
anymore by then.
retired.
Right.
He may be retired. Sergio Busquets is also one of the older players on the team whom some people have wondered, is he going to continue? Is he going to retire? Neither of those 2 players is under contract for next year. Let's put it this way. Neither of those 2 players is under contract for next year. So to put down a sanction for next year's Leagues Cup is it's a little bit of an empty. It doesn't really carry much weight, in my opinion.
And that's why I brought up, do you sanction them as a franchise, as a team? But then how do you do that? What's not too extreme? What's the right type of penalty for a team when the next year's tournament is months away and the roster could look drastically different by then?
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. But certainly some type of punishment is deserved.
Yeah, well, let's hear from Oscar Ustari about what happened.
Oscar, ¿qué han podido reflexionar después de esta derrota ante Sanders?
Bueno, es difícil. Me parece que no pasó mucho tiempo del partido. Era una competencia que queríamos volver a ganarla. Habíamos llegado hasta aquí muy ilusionados, pero bueno, el resultado también un poco engañoso, ¿no? Porque durante el segundo tiempo hemos tenido el control del juego, pero esto se gana con goles y nosotros no teníamos que cometer los errores que cometimos, que nos siguen con tanto caro.
¿Qué pasó al final del encuentro donde se ve que estabas tú con Luis Suarez conversando? Empezó todo este incidente que después, bueno, obviamente manchó una final que estaba muy buena.
Yo la verdad que vi que había un amontonamiento de gente, pero no te puedo decir nada. Yo estaba ahí con Luis porque había una persona que incluso estaba parada ahí, no quería irse y como que animaba a que todo siguiera. Me enfoqué en eso porque era lo que más cerca tenía. Después lo que te diga te mentiría, no quisiera decir nada respecto a eso porque yo no vi nada. Lo pueden ver en todos lados, estaba con Luis y lo único que puedo decir es eso.
Por un momento pareció que hubo un juego, parte del plan era brusco, sacar a Leonel de jugada, estar muy cerca de él de manera física. ¿Cuál es tu opinión al respecto?
Sí, creo que sí, pero bueno, nosotros tenemos que saber que a Leo lo van a buscar, le van a pegar, es nuestro jugador el más desequilibrante, sabemos, entendemos muchas veces esas cosas. Hay cosas que las podemos controlar nosotros como jugador, después bueno, hay un árbitro que impone las normas, pero bueno, más allá de eso nosotros tenemos que saber jugar con esas circunstancias y bueno, hoy nos costó un poco.
¿Qué creen que debieron de hacer diferente para poder ganar este
Bueno,
partido?
a ver, nosotros creemos que no tenemos que dar tanta facilidad para que no hagan los goles. Esa es la realidad. Llevamos muchos partidos que siempre nos convierten y nos cuesta caro porque siempre terminás teniendo que remontar un resultado y muchas veces el partido dura 90, 95 minutos y hay que trabajar con atención 100 minutos y nosotros nos distraemos una vez y nos cuesta un gol.
De cara a lo que queda de la temporada, ya no van a enfrentar 3 torneos a la vez como les tocó en estos 8 meses, ya se pueden enfocar en una sola competencia. ¿Qué aprendizaje queda de estos 8 meses de competencia?
Mirá, seguramente que no nos queda otra que dar vuelta a la página, es nuestra obligación. Las competencias que queremos ganar y que las que estábamos jugando lo intentamos siempre hasta el final. De hecho, hemos llegado a semifinal y a final. Hemos hecho, creo que, un buen mundial de clubes, ¿no es cierto?, donde presentamos a la liga de la mejor manera. Y ahora queda terminar con lo que queda del torneo local, entonces tratar de hacer de la mejor manera, tratar de conseguir los puntos para poder terminar primero y tener una definición en casa. Pero bueno, ahora tenemos unos cuantos días no solo para recuperarnos de esta derrota dura, sino para preparar el final del torneo.
Última pregunta. Oscar, con toda la experiencia que tienes, ¿qué tanto crees que hubiera cambiado el gol errado de Tadeo Valente?
Bueno, es fútbol. El que no está ahí adentro seguramente no es el que se equivoca. La realidad es que tanto cuando nos convierten o cuando no convertimos siguen siendo fallos nuestros, que sí te puede cambiar un partido porque era el empate, pero bueno, así se dio el juego y hay que aceptarlo.
¿Cómo transformas esta derrota como motivación para lo que viene la temporada?
Repetime, perdón.
¿Cómo transformas esta derrota en motivación para el equipo?
Hay que decir, ahora me toca masticar bronca, no me queda otra. No me queda otra porque las finales es lo que tiene, que te golpea muchísimo si no la podés ganar. Más cuando por cierto momento del partido hemos hecho para poder convertir y ganar y ahora, bueno, nada, levantar la cabeza, no conozco otra forma que seguir trabajando, animar al plantel de la mejor manera y aceptar lo que viene. Gracias.
Oscar Starr, he's one of the team leaders, by the way. Even though he just joined the team midway, through last season, late last season, September, he has emerged as one of the team leaders. You can kind of see why he always seems to be sort of the grown up, one of the grown ups in the room. He, from everything that I know and hear, he does do a lot with helping the younger players and sort of unifying the group because it really is a roster that's very divided between star players who have played at the highest levels and World Cups and then younger players. And he's been a leader all along. He basically said, first of all, he said that he felt as Mascherano did that the score was a little misleading. He said, that we had a lot of control in the second half, especially, but goals win games and we were unable to score goals. And that's the bottom line. He said that we make it too easy, time and again, too easy for other teams to score. And we end up paying the price. And it costs us dearly, these mistakes. He said, because we end up having to chase the game over and over. And this has happened so many times. They have had heroics at the end where they have to win, but why should they need heroics to win at the end of the game? He's saying we make it too hard on ourselves by making costly mistakes earlier in the game. And, and sometimes we can't catch the game. And this was one of the cases. He was asked, do you think that the other team has played Leo too physically or whatever? It seemed like they really were targeting him. And he said, yes, of course. Any team that we're going to play against is going to target Leo. He is he's the key player on our team. We know that, we understand that. And, there's certain parts we can control, certain parts are, the referees have to decide how he's being played. But we understand that going into the game, and we have to understand and learn how to play, knowing that that's going to be the case all the time. And then he said, that they have to turn the page, that right now he feels like, look, we wanted to win all these trophies and we made the semifinal, CONCACAF Champions Cup. We made the final of this one. We played well. I think we played well in the Club World Cup, but they didn't win any of those cups. So they're 0 for 3 on those 3 cups. There's one left, which is MLS Cup. And he said, we have to just swallow this as hard as it is to take and move forward and try to regroup, motivate the team. And what they have left is the MLS Cup. That's it. There's one cup left for them to play for. They've not won any of the other 3.
Yeah, and that will resume after this FIFA break, as we said, this September 13th up in Charlotte, and then the crazy rematch, anticipated rematch by then for sure, against the Seattle Sounders. But this team left to pick up the pieces for now, and we don't even know where all these pieces are going to land because we're still waiting to hear. We're still waiting to see what sanctions, if any, could be on the way. We would assume there would be after that ugly incident the other day. But one of the things we wanted to close the show on this week was bye-bye Benha. He's
Bye-bye
off on
Benha.
loan.
Benha Kramachi, hometown favorite, Key Biscayne kid. Everybody loves him. He's a teen idol. All the teeny bopper girls love him. He's a cute kid, photogenic, telegenic, whatever you want to say. But, mainly he's a homegrown kid like Noah Allen, like Ian Frey. He's a kid who came up from the academy, was playing at Weston FC. He's a local kid, Argentine American. So there's that angle where he grew up idolizing Lionel Messi and then gets to be his teammate. He's only 20 years old. He's on the U.S. national team, got to play in the Olympics, was the youngest player on the U.S. Olympic team at 20 years old. So a kid with a lot of potential. And he's off to Parma, to the Italian Serie A first division. He wanted more playing time. He felt that he wanted to take the next step. And he wrote in his farewell to the team that was posted on social media, he said, these last 4 years have been unbelievable. He was so grateful for everything that this club did for him. But he said he feels like he's ready to step out of his comfort zone and take the next step and challenge himself in a different way. And, once Rodrigo de Paul came, look, Fede Redondo left, and now Benha leaves. These are 2 players who were going to be backups, no question. As long as DePaul is on this roster, if you play that position, you're probably not going to start,
Right.
and you're not going to get as many minutes. And so Benha was ready to take the next step, had always said that he wanted to play in Europe, that he didn't know how long he was going to stay here. So, he said this was an opportunity for him to move on, step out of his comfort zone and challenge himself at another level in a foreign country, in Italy. And so, we wish him the best. He's a really nice kid, comes from a nice family. And, it's a shame to see him go because we've talked about, in talking about Seattle today and in the past, we've talked about for the future of this club, when Messi is not here playing anymore, he may be, part owner of the team, but he's not going to be on the field. It would be nice to have some of these homegrown players still be on the team and be the faces of the club. And Benha is one of those kids who was one of the faces of the club, and he's now gone. He's gone on loan, but the assumption is that he would be bought unless he really doesn't do well at all over there. But he went on loan, and the purchase price is around $5 million. He's on loan through June of 26. So at that point, Parma can choose to buy him. And so if he does well over there, they would buy him for about $5 million. But anyway, we'll see what happens with him. It'll be interesting to follow his season and see how he does over there.
Yeah, we wish Benha the best out there. It's a great opportunity playing Serie A for sure. If he can get on the field consistently and get that experience for sure. Well, until then, we will be back next week. Very hectic week. Next week, we'll still be in the middle of this FIFA break though, so still kind of an in between. But we probably would have an update on what happened as far as the sanctions with this club and any developments going on. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about maybe anything going on the international side with any of the players that are currently playing for their home countries right now. But we'll take a look ahead to the stretch run we're in the stretch run now when it comes to the MLS schedule, with the Charlotte game being the first one on tap on the 13th. So we'll be able to give that a good look ahead starting next week. But thank you as always for watching Inside Inter Miami. Remember to catch us on YouTube, catch us on MiamiHerald.com, catch Michelle's work on MiamiHerald.com. I'm sure she's going to have a story quickly on everything that'll happen when it does happen regarding the fallout from this ugly incident with Seattle in the League's Cup final. But until then, for Michelle, I'm Andre Fernandez. We'll be back next week with more Inside Inter Miami, and thanks for watching, everybody.